تسعدنا دعوة الدكتور ناصر أبو الحسن وخواكين بيريز جويكوتشيا الذكاء الاصطناعي شركة مهندسون معماريون وشركاؤهم الكويت، فليتفضل مشكورا.
I would like to start thanking for the invitation to the organizers. We are a practice that we have been almost a bit more than 15 years, and we are basically a practice which dedicates to architecture. We will introduce you to the way we operate, which we refer always to experiment, something that we are proud of. In which way we practice? It's mainly about layering, about intervening in the public space. I will not take a lot of your time, but I will pass the microphone to Nasser Abul Hassan, and he will explain you a bit more. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you again for the invitation. My name is Nasser Abul Hassan. I'm one of the principals and co-founders of AGI Architects. We will start this presentation by just talking about the title, and I think the title is quite informative, Home versus House. And this is something that we, within this region, struggle with. It's trying to define, how do we define a house? How do we live? How do we actually enjoy living? So we'll be taking an experiment that we have continued to work with in Kuwait. And it's an experiment that is very much related to the rest of this region. So we have multiple errors. We have an error that is pre-oil, and we have an error that is post-oil. And then the post-oil has gone into various levels of transformation where we as a society began to change, and we as a society began to adapt from our surroundings and try to move forward. So in Kuwait, which is the example that we know quite well, people used to live by the sea, attached to the trade within the sea, used to live in cities that are spectacular in terms of response to the environment, to social aspects. And these cities are quite unique, where trade is the primary way of living. And most importantly, the social aspects are very much interlinked. So when we looked at historical homes within the region, Kuwait is one of them, where courtyard houses were very much the prevailing way of designing, and it was driven just purely because of social, environmental, and cultural consciousness. So after the oil, Kuwait, like the rest of the region, there is a new typology that came out, which is called a single-family house, and that single-family house was very much unique. That transformation of the single-family house began to be seen in models similar to this, and as we drive even around Jeddah, you'll begin to see similar models where they're homes that are very repetitive. They have some ornamentation along the facade without any distinction of how do we live, how do we actually take care of issues related to privacy and so on. In parallel, there is always a second way of living, which is in medium to medium-high density apartment blocks. Again, around Jeddah, you are able to see models similar to this, which have zero interaction between the neighbors and zero interaction to the city-urban fabric. So how did we begin to change this as an office, which practices both in Europe as well as the Middle East and primarily in the Gulf? We started to look at these experiments from the urban setting, but also from the internal social setting within these residences, and how people really want to live, the relationship between what is our wants versus our needs, which is an important element, and how do we want to live based on those real needs. Like any other settings, similar to where we are right now, we're very much driven to indoor life and life that revolves around malls and living indoor, and that's something that is not very helpful to living in a well-being environment. So as an office, we started practicing on different scales, and we practice from single-family homes to what they call investment houses, which are medium to higher density residences. And we worked across all of these scales with the same idea, which is how do we layer what Joaquin was mentioning, the way people live? How do we distinguish their needs and how do we evolve their needs to a better living environment? So I will not dwell on explaining each project, but I will dwell on explaining each concept. So this particular house was a single family house that revolved around how do we improve the relationship to the outside while creating multiple layers of relationship internally within the project itself. The connection to the outer settings, as well as the connection to the inner layering within the house through climatically responsive spaces that begin to create light and shadow and create a lot of privacy for the dwellers. Similar experiments, we're doing them not only in Kuwait, but we're doing them in Saudi Arabia, where we've taken similar concepts of trying to, again, create homes that are completely internally looking, and these homes begin to subtract certain volumes out of these homes to create light and shadow and a lot of privacy. So if we're looking even on a different scale, in Al Ula, we're working also on multiple experiments that are linked to living in the environment. And here you have to respond directly to the water, to the trees, to the landscape itself, where it's quite important to begin to build from within. So we look at the historical reminiscences of certain walls, historical trees, waterways, the mountain itself, and began to integrate our projects within that. We're not here creating a model, but we're here trying to respond to an environment that is quite unique in its setting and unique to the response of the people and the way they live. Obviously, these experiments does not stop at low density. We develop medium density, where within a medium density plot, and I think this is very important, is how do we develop choice? Because unfortunately, within the Gulf region, especially homes for the locals have been always driven to a single family home. And I think the choice has to be given by the developers, by the governments, that we give medium density, higher density, and the users is able to choose between the various choices. So this is actually a medium density dwelling that has about 28 apartments that we've designed it not to work for, it's actually designed to work for a Muslim family, a local family that wants the privacy, wants to cook, have smells while they cook, have the environment that will be able to exit, enter without disturbing their neighbor, and having the full utmost privacy within these projects, and having views towards the sea. These experiments did not stop horizontally. We developed this vertically. This is a project that we looked at where we have multiple types of apartments that are running vertically. These apartments are actually courtyard vertical apartment building that gives the utmost privacy to the end user. This is one of the built projects. And this has a central courtyard. The central courtyard is where you revolve around and gives you the privacy of living within a mid-rise that has a home for multi-generational people. So you're able to live, your father will be able to live above you, and multiple siblings are able to rent in that same dwellings to create a vertical environment. And that's quite important to the setting that we're living in. Obviously, it has to respond to the views, respond to the streets, and so on. These experiments do not stop in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. We're working with Ad-Dar in Abu Dhabi to develop what they call the Emirati vertical housing. And it's quite a unique program that the government is trying to pursue every developer to be able to respond to not just developing towards an urban landscape, but developing to an end user. So it's a young Emirati family who's ready to live in a multi-generational mid-rise that has apartments that are quite large in terms of scale, but has the utmost privacy for each of them. And these are apartments that we believe are the future of how the developers, not only in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, and the rest of the region, should be pushing to give that uniqueness to these development, to respond to the urban fabric as well as to respond to the internal well-being of each of the apartment users. We've experimented with the same in Kuwait as well, where we've gone to high-rises, and within those high-rises we developed unique apartment responses that are not looked at apartments, but looked at actually as vertical villas. And these vertical villas have individual cores. You never meet your neighbor. If you choose not to meet them, you're able to have social spaces throughout the whole project that begins to link you together with the community, if you choose to, and begin to connect to the outside quite well. And towards the end, those are again high rises that are driven towards how do I develop smaller apartments internally, but still create outdoor living that is dispersed throughout the whole project. And these outdoor living creates pockets for the kids to play, for the people to come together, and you start to interconnecting families and their social well-being throughout the whole development. And the final experiment that we're working on as we speak, which is actually in Oman, where we have been mandated to look at larger developments of more than 7 million square meters. And within that, we're integrating not only within a topography, but we're actually creating parallel lives. We're creating a life for the car, that is the primary access to these dwellings, but we're actually creating a more important life, which is for the pedestrian, for the cyclist, and as well as for the kids, to live in a safe environment that is completely detached from the car. So these are some of the photorealistic renders that we're working throughout the project. So to try to sum this up, these experiments will continue, and there are many architects who are working with a similar methodology. But I think our role within this community is to try to push even further and to try to challenge the developers, challenge the local municipalities to ask these questions and to try to find ways to address them within the creative realm. Thank you very much.